Hotel Wi-Fi for the win. Yeah. Okay. I think the demo gods are related to the preview gods here in this case, so I'm going to blame it on them, and we're just going to say we're going to skip this. What this is, I'm going to encourage everybody to go check this out. If you have not seen the Microsoft teaming music video by Homer McEwen, it's awesome. Great video. Check that out. So bummed that it did not play right now. But he said he wanted to actually be here and perform it, but he said, feel free to play the video. I can't be there, but... Welcome to Comms vNext Reconnect 2021, and thank you. It is therapeutic on so many levels to see all of you here. The team cannot begin to express gratitude to the sponsors, to the attendees, to everyone that made this happen in every kind of way. Our thanks are just, they're pouring out to all of you. So thank you for making the trip. Thank you for being here. I got a couple quick things that I want to go over, housekeeping items, if you will, before I introduce our keynote. First is the Just Attend app. Now, if you came through the registration line, and I know all you did, you've already heard of the Just Attend app. If you didn't already read about it in the emails and see us tweet about it, etc. We had a couple little quirks with it as we were getting set up and going. Some of those have been remedied last night by the developers on the back end. So please use that app to go in, sign in, get your sessions all booked out so that your agenda shows up. That is how we're going to collect feedback, and that's how you keep track of the agenda and what's going on. So please, that'll be important for feedback for speakers, us, the whole 9 yards. So Just Attend app, please use that. Next item I wanted to bring up was the badges and our little no and yes, red, green sticker thing at the bottom here, the approachability section. It's kind of something new that we tried. We're wondering how it will go, but the whole idea here, if you didn't get the explanation at the front, was in general, if someone has not put the green yes sticker over their red square, that means that they would really appreciate in these odd times that we find ourselves living in, if you give them a little bit of extra space instead of getting right up in their face for a conversation. If they've put the green sticker on there, they're good to say hello and have a conversation in a little more proximity. But there's a little bit of a snag there. We ran out of green stickers this morning. So kind of grain of salt in that whole thing there. Kind of, hey, how you doing? And see where that goes. We're all figuring it out, right? So, yes, if you could use a not Pat Richards sticker. Let's go with that. I like that idea. So, so that's the kind of the safety thing I wanted to bring up there. There is complimentary masks, both surgical and customized masks provided by Landis. So thank you, Landis, for the masks. They are at the front, at the check-in registration booth. If anyone wants one, they need one, etc., those are there. There is sanitizer throughout the hand sanitizer throughout the venue, so you can make use of that. And of course, if you read through the safety policy ahead of time, you kind of got our stance there. You know how we're positioning things to give everybody a little more room than previous years as we try to get back to normal, or whatever normal is going to look like in the future, right? So there's that. The other thing is the attendee party is happening tonight here, 5 to 7 p.m. in the expo hall. So if you were here in 2019, it'll be similar to that. We'll have drinks and snacks and all that stuff in the main pre-function area, and then the expo floor will be open. So plenty of time to talk with the sponsors if you have not already throughout the day, but drop in there, thank them, check out their solutions, and then tonight we'll have more time to talk about that in a more casual environment. Please, in the expo hall, apply a little extra caution in there. Make sure that you're, being conscious of who's comfortable with what, especially as you have more up-close and in-person conversations at the booths. So that's the party tonight, 5 to 7 p.m. Don't go running off and miss that. We definitely want you here for that. That, I think, is, as soon as I get off the stage, I'm going to remember exactly the other things I wanted to say. So I think that's our housekeeping items. With that, I'm going to introduce our first keynote speaker. We've got a couple today. We're doing it a little differently. And I think most of you know this person. I really wish I had keyed up a different video, but I've been told it's off the internet. But we are extremely thrilled and happy to have Jamie Stark from Microsoft back here. He was our keynote in 2018 when we kicked this whole shindig off. He is back to kick us off. this year for the technical portion of our keynote. So without any more rambling, Jamie, thank you so much for being here. Please take the stage.
Thank you. All right, first of all, I have a giant bass response to my voice. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, good. Bummed that video didn't work. Y'all should check that out because it really was like just a thing of wonder and mastery and awesomeness. But we are switching laptops now for those of you that are joining us from remote, and Pat Richards' awesome setup for AV is going to work flawlessly because that's just how these things go, right? See, exactly. This is weird, right? This is just all a little weird, and so that's the first part. Just kind of like taking that in and recognizing that this is a little weird. I haven't seen y'all, for a while, and the organizers thought, hey, this would be kind of cool to like, you come up and you got to talk about what's going on at Microsoft and maybe what you've been up to a little bit. And I'm like, I have a desk that's literally built into a closet in the guest room. It's not our office. It's literally the guest room, and that's kind of where I hide. And I generate specs and fix bugs and, try to like keep stuff going. So yeah, but no, there's more. And so as I was thinking through this, I was like, all right, where should I start? And I start kind of pre-pandemic. This is a picture, anyone recognize by chance? I actually had somebody in my school community recognize that this was Fort Canning Park in freaking Singapore. And I, because I had it as a background on a conference call. I've been using it as my team's background. So it reminds me of like, oh, I got to be in Singapore before the apocalypse. I mean, before the global economic meltdown and pandemic. And when we came back from Singapore, we realized that, oh my gosh, stuff was really kind of going sideways. This was in February. And so like sometime in January in Teams Admin Center, by the way, I look after a thing called Teams Admin Center. It's been a while since I've spoken in front of people before, but I'm an engineer at Microsoft. And anyway, so when we were working on Teams Admin Center in like January, February, we were seeing some weird stuff from China. People going like, we really need to get out to this website and it's just not working and the firewall's screwing us up. And so we did a bunch of optimizations and we saw this crazy increase in usage. And that crazy increase in usage was like there. And we were like, this is nuts. And it's just since kind of just gone up and to the right and just kind of gone goofy. And, but we've just been really fortunate that we've been able to kind of pick up and keep doing the work and like keep pushing the code out and keep this train going. Obviously, there's no left-hand scale because I'm not here to announce anything about like Teams MAU or usage or whatever. But like, just in terms of my little website that I help run, like, there's been a lot going on here. Clearly, a lot of folks are doing Teams. But when I was last in the office, this is what the office is like. So this is the 14th floor of Lincoln Square. Teams engineering happens in a lot of places around the world. Teams engineering, some of it happens in Estonia and Tallinn, where we have some PSTN interface work happening. A bunch of it happens in India and Hyderabad, where we've got a variety of different kind of core services. Then a bunch of Teams engineering happens in Redmond and Lincoln Square, and this is in Bellevue. And like literally, it's this time capsule. It's crazy. Like all the PMs and all the devs, we all just kind of picked up and took our laptops home and started working. There's kind of a fun, Where's Waldo game here. There's one guy, I didn't even know he was in the room when I was taking the picture. And he's kind of right in the kind of center of the screen. Oh yeah, I'm not gonna get the pointer to work. But like, I mean, it's kind of odd. Like, I know this person's still at the company, and they're still in the org. They've got the IT Pro like sloth sticker. Like, I know whose laptop this is, and it's just been hanging out there. It's kind of different. This was my desk. I used to work in the Teams engineering organization. Now I work in its sister organization that's called IC3 for intelligent communication collaboration cloud. And basically, like, we're kind of the engine room. We do a lot of the fundamental services that then gets exposed to teams. But regardless, like, this used to be my desk. I abandoned a couple phones there. We have this kind of really gorgeous view out of Lincoln Square, and like, you know, it's pretty cool. And I kind of miss a little bit of being in that office and having giant whiteboards to be able to have, like, you know, crazy architectures spun up everywhere. But, you know, one of the things about software development these days is that I gotta be honest with y'all, software devs and software engineering, like, we're really, really coddled. Like, it's kind of over the top, the level of like, of comfort and just stuff that the organization kind of packs around us. And I got to admit, I feel a little bit guilty about it. So this isn't the cafe at Lincoln Square for whatever reason. When I went into Lincoln Square and I was taking pictures all over the office, I missed the one kind of, but this is generally like what a cafe, kind of kitchen sort of setup in a Microsoft office will look like. And you may think like, all right, whatever, there's gonna be some microwaves and some coffee machines and some water, and like that's all reasonable. But the thing is that it's not. Because there's probably a dozen forms of still water that you can get in a cafe or in a kitchen kind of thing at Microsoft. And like every floor has one of these things. So like, here are of course, I can't just have one coffee machine. I've got to have two different kinds of coffee machines. And each coffee machine, of course, is going to have both calf and not decaf. But they all do water. I swear, they all have a little button that says hot water there. And then you can also get rinse water. Not that you use rinse water for anything. But like, okay, so there's two. And then I've got the sink that'll do hot and cold. And then I've got a machine here that has cooked water and hot water and cold water. And then another machine that, if you want to count ice, I think ice, like, that counts too. And then we would have these these things of infused waters. Those stopped during COVID times. But like, software people, I don't know, like, we have, I don't know, maybe 30 different types of teas, and then all these sodas, and like, oh my God, there's no more almond milk. Like, you would think if you were, you know, looking at this from an archaeological perspective, like, okay, I get it. Microsoft's making a lot of money, and they have a lot of fluids there. So like, more fluids for the developers equals, like we were just, software runs on hydration. Is that the calculus here? Clearly not, right? Because nobody's in the office. This stuff's all hanging out. Well, you know, granted, maybe somebody's stealing soy milk or almond milk, but like, yeah, it's weird. But you know, not everybody obviously has the ability to have this kind of opulence. But when you do have an opportunity to go back into the office, maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of think through, like, what would be the stuff that would be nice and convenient for you to have there, right? Like, if we go back into the office, when we start to gather in areas like this, boy, we should really have the opportunity to just take an opportunity to improve it a little bit. And I'm not saying, hey, if you work for a not-for-profit, clearly, like, you shouldn't be having 7 different types of water and 3 different types of soy milk and all these different, like, I get it. Like, there's probably more important ways for you to spend your money, but I call on all of us to take an opportunity to step back and reflect a little bit and go like, the business has done okay, you know, and all of our devs and stuff, like, we didn't really need all of these things, but certainly for you coming back into your environment, like, maybe there are some things to consider. Maybe there are some things to think about. It makes me go back to this phrase that we used now a shockingly long time ago. And it went something around like, work is something you do. It's not a place you go. And I remember this from when we did the launch of 2010. So this is a screenshot from the launch of Link Server 2010. This is in an event that we did in New York. Chris is the person there on the left. He's now the CMO of Microsoft, Chris Capicella, and obviously Bill's on the video screen. And I got to have some fun in this show because, you know, we're gonna have Bill on a video and we're selling the thing that's gonna bring Bill over on video. So It can't fail. Okay, here's an unlimited amount of resources. Make sure that the founder doesn't look terrible. Can you do that? Awesome. So that was kind of fun. But one of the things that came out from that is that we had to put 4 cameras in front of Chris. And I'm kind of happy that it doesn't like look really goofy, but there really are 4 cameras there. All right, so let's see if we can get a little, okay. Let me try this new PowerPoint feature. Okay, hold on. Cortana, enhance. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Hey, this AI stuff, I'm telling you, like, it's really gotten good in the last couple years. No, so we had to throw 4 cameras up there because, you know, we had 2 different demos, and then of course we had like the primary and the redundant, and little known fact, when we were calling up Bill, like that was all on the redundant circuits, because those redundant circuits had a slightly better network quality as we went end to end. But it was funny, like, I swore that we had this quote. I swore that this was like, we had stickers, and we had a bunch of stuff for this. When I started searching for it, all I was finding was quotes of like 3 or 4 years later from Cisco and Avaya and competitors at the time, and I'm like, okay, no, my memory is tortured, but it's not that bad. And so finally, I was like trying all these different, you know, variations of it. I came across, work is something you do, not a place you go. And so then I stumbled on that, and I was like, oh, thank goodness, and this was the launch event for Link, and yes, my memory isn't so tortured. Work is something you do, not a place to go. But what I think is hilarious about this quote is that the author of this particular article said, is a line that could have been scripted by Microsoft. It wasn't, I checked. And I went, you know, I was in the marketing organization then, and I kind of like, yeah, I don't know. And there's a whole nother customer, and they had the exact same words. And maybe all the customers were like really inspired by each other, and so they were using each other's quotes and stuff. But nah, I kind of think that we cooked that one. But regardless, I mean, this is 2010. Like we were telling the story, right? Like we were telling the story of what was going to happen, what we've been living through for the last 18 months. Work's something you do. I don't have a place to go anymore. I'm just going to do my work, and I'm going to have the software tools to do it. Like, I've had this for a decade, right? Now, granted, if it was on the server, perhaps it would be a little bit more difficult for us to have the same business outcomes that we've had today. Yes, there was some complexity with the server, and, you know, yeah, perhaps some of our installations might not have been so flexible and so resilient as to have allowed, you know, all of the great things that we've been able to do here. You know, maybe it did kind of take this time and take a little bit more sophisticated architecture and take a little bit more kind of elasticity that the cloud provides. But I know it certainly took all of you. It certainly took all of you, you know, in the pandemic, as you were, you know, helping out your, you know, homeschool pod, or the, you know, the folks in your community who are just now starting to figure out how to use devices. You all stepped up and you were like, teenager, put on your headset. We're not going to hear you as well when you're on speaker, because your hands are literally covering the microphone on your Chromebook, right? Like you had that knowledge, you had that tribal knowledge, you had all that capability. You were able to go in and you know, help your colleagues kind of get set up and figure out all their bandwidth issues. And maybe you got so far as to like go, look, let's get into your router and let's start deprioritizing, you know, your family's Netflix traffic, so that way all of your RTC traffic, all of your real-time stuff, that can go a little bit better. Maybe you were just right at the point of bringing somebody into the cloud right when the pandemic hit, and they were just, you know, able to get up and running at just the right time. Thank you for all of that work. Thank you, most importantly, as an engineer at Microsoft, for caring enough to tell us what's wrong and helping us make it better. It's literally why I'm here, and it just means so much. It's so easy to get kind of caught up in our ivory tower. Literally, it used to be literally, right, with all of the gilded things and all of the 17 different types of fluids. And now, we're in our closets in our homes, and we're doing the work, but we really care about all of this. And it means so much. So thank you. Thank you for making all of that happen. And thank you especially for being here. It's awesome to be here. I can't wait to be able to talk about the work that my little team has been doing with Teams Admin Center. I'm going to riff for a little while longer because I know I'm supposed to transition this to another person within the Comms vNext community. And so I'm just going to continue to riff as they approach the stage, because then that way the transition will be that much more clean. And I guess the last thing I'd like to say is thank you for all your grace. Clearly we're all excited to be here. Clearly we're all a little dusty in this. And so, hey, thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, well, we finish up and we do some microphone changes here real quick. For the next speaker, I just want to give you guys another thank you for showing up. I'm Adam Ball, I'm one of the organizers here, along with Josh and Jonathan and Pat, and we also have somebody who couldn't make it today, and I'm just going to ask really quickly. So Tina was unable to make it. She helped out a tremendous amount with our marketing and everything like that, and today was her birthday. So if I can just get everybody, because we are live streaming, if everybody can just say happy birthday, Tina, real quick. Happy birthday, Tina! Woo-hoo. All right, so before we get going on our next keynote speaker here, I wanted to give you all kind of where we were coming from when we came to Comms vNext Reconnect. So it's kind of been an interesting time. I remember Ignite 2019, I actually spoke on IT Pro burnout, and little did we know that 4 months later, the world was going to be ending up in this pandemic where we all were going to end up with these different stressors, such as being isolated, being locked down. I mean, we've got friends from around the planet that are still under some lockdowns and everything right now. And so as we kind of talked through this, and we kind of started to say, what would it look like to come back in person? The key thing that we came back around was this whole idea that we're all coming from different places. Some of us might not have been affected. Some of us were dramatically affected. We've had people who have been sick, who have lost loved ones, etc. And when we came back around this, it was, how do we come back and have empathy towards each other when we come back into the office? Not everybody's coming back into the office 100%, but when you do meet people, what does that look like? When you're coming from a spot of isolation, or even potentially for some people, that isolation led to depression. And so when we came back around this whole idea of Reconnect came back around. So with that, I'm going to introduce Joel Rowland, who's going to be our keynote speaker, who's going to take us in a new spot for us. And Joel, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be here. Today I want to talk about reconnecting through our stories. But specifically, I want to talk about reconnecting through some defining moments. And a few of those defining moments that I'm going to talk about are historic moments, in-the-room moments, and personal moments. But for me personally, I'm very passionate about the concept of story. And I'm passionate about that because of my personal story, but I've also had the opportunity to interview and engage thousands of people about their story. Not a news reporter, I actually lead a nonprofit, and I've been engaged in nonprofit work for over 16 years. I'm also a speaker, trainer, and coach with the John Maxwell team. But what's been interesting is the different nonprofits that I have led, though they've had a different focus, or maybe some of the leadership things I've done, the audiences that I've spoke to, engaged, and trained, they may have had a different diverse background, but there was one thing that always remained the same. There was a pattern, and that's that every person has a story. And their story is always a unique story. I've heard stories from youth, from kids, to teachers, to parents, to people incarcerated. And it's very interesting because everybody has a story that needs to be told. It's a story that needs to be heard. It's a story that needs to be understood and listened to. And I think that there's something about the concept of story. Just on a very basic human level, we all connect and we resonate with the idea of stories. I mean, think about the narratives throughout history, the stories that we've created and that we engage. We have poetry, romance, we have crime and mystery, we have horror, we have stories around spirituality and religion and adventure and comedy, and each song has its own story. We have news stories, and we even have the latest gossip, often has stories around it. But whatever it may be, there's this idea that we connect through our stories. Now, think about this. If I ask you today what your favorite movie is, you can probably remember the main character. You can probably remember what you liked about that character, maybe some characters that you disliked along the way. But then if I ask further, you could probably remember the plot and how the movie began and how it ended. But if I ask you about 2021 and the Q1 business update, you may not have all the details for that agenda. But when I think about this, I love stories, but I have to admit that I recently just watched the movie Titanic. It was recommended by a friend of mine, and it was interesting to watch this movie knowing the history and knowing a little bit about the concept of the characters. But when I watched it for the first time, it was the opening lines of the scene that really got me in. Brock Lovett, he is the famed treasure hunter. He's known for searching the ocean, and he's trying to find the heart of the ocean. And it opens with this scene where he's looking underwater, and Brock says this. He says, "Okay, quiet, we're rolling. Seeing her come out of the darkness like a ghost ship still gets me every time. To see the sad ruin of the great ship sitting here, where she landed at 2:30 in the morning of April 15th, 1912, after her long fall from the world above." There's just something about opening lines of a story. Now, what's powerful and fascinating is stories have this ability to invite us on an adventure. I mean, just seeing my slide there, you probably remember the story of Jack and Rose and maybe what your favorite moment of that story was. But it's interesting how these stories invite us on the adventure, but they also introduce us to these new people. They take us into a world of maybe mystery or suspense, into laughter or joy or love or tragedy. And with that, I think about some other opening lines of movies. You may remember some of these opening lines. A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. Or maybe you remember this one, A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. We all know that one. This one I recently just watched too. When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. And because I loved horror movies growing up, Child's Play, the story of Chucky, starts with, "I got the strangler." Or maybe it's not the lines. Maybe for you it's music. Maybe you're a music fan and it's the theme songs to certain things. You may recognize this theme song. Don't know if we have, yeah, I see some people dancing to that theme song. Or maybe for you, you remember this one. And I'm sure we all know this one very well. Anybody have that as a ringtone? And in normal fashion, Star Wars. It's just interesting how these things, opening lines, how music, how tunes, how these things grab our attention and they make us feel a certain way. Whether it's the stories found in these books or movies or songs or sitcoms, they resonate with us because they invite us not only into an alternate reality, but they actually invite us to put ourselves in the place of the characters. All of you have probably said at some point as you watched one of these shows that I put on the screen, "I know someone just like that." I personally know someone just like Dwight Schrute. Or maybe you look and you watch Friends and you say, "I wish I could meet someone just like her or him." Or maybe you watch a movie and you said, I wish this was the story of my life." But there's something about this, these opening lines, they do this, but the Titanic movie does the same. It calls us into this invitation. It invites us to join a time and a place in history. I love the part of the story when Rose asked Brock, I was just wondering if you had found the heart of the ocean yet. A little later, someone asks Rose, can I get you anything? Is there anything you would like? And she says, yes, I would like to see my drawing. Now, I didn't put a slide on the screen of the drawing, but if you've seen that scene, you remember that scene. But what's interesting about that is this was a time in history. This was a place. But what the writers do is they invite you into this story of this in-the-room moment, where what Rose is saying about her story is that even in this great ship, this story of the Titanic that impacted many people's lives, there was an in-the-room moment that you had to be there to understand. And this is what's fascinating to me, is that though the story of the Titanic impacted many people on a large scale, there were more characters. I think about what would it be like to interview the musicians on the Titanic, or maybe the crew, or the bartenders. What would their story be? How did they end up on the Titanic? Or then there's the scene where Jack and Rose is looking off of the ship and they're watching the dolphins, and it makes me think, man, what was it like to stand at the edge of the Titanic and watch the dolphins off of the side? And I don't know, maybe this is why the Titanic film is still so popular today. 24 years later, it released on Netflix, and as it released, it was in the top 10 once again. But I think it's because we hear the story from someone's point of view. We hear the story of someone that was there. At least that's the way the story goes in the movie Titanic. But that's not all. See, this is the story of this one ship and this one place and this one time and these many different characters. And this is not a movie review about the Titanic, by the way. I think it's the story of us and where we are today. See, there's historic things that happen in history, and in those historic moments, we're able to share this space and time, but there's also in-the-room moments that happen. There's personal things that happen within our story. This is what I like to call defining moments. And there's something about the story of the Titanic that seemed to resonate because it's the story of the way things were at one point in time, but how they can change overnight. I don't know if you can relate, but you can probably think of a time in your life where things were one way, but seemingly overnight, everything changed. And this seems to be the cycle of life and how life goes. These defining moments happen that they change everything about the way we engage the human experience. Now, I want to talk about these things: in-the-room moments, historic moments, and personal moments. Now, if you look at in-the-room moments, they connect us to a significant story. We were in the room when. Or maybe you look at historic moments, they connect us to how the world has changed because of a significant event. And then personal moments, they have the ability to connect us to one another. Now, thinking about that in-the-room moments, I mean, think about this, in the room, a group of people who are connected because they experienced something significant together. I think of some of those, the most memorable moments for me was I was in the room as Mike Sims. He was a Navy SEAL. He told the story of swimming out into the ocean when the Apollo came back from the moon. And he told us the story of what it was like to be there and engage the people that were there. An in-the-room moment for me was when I got certified with the John Maxwell team. There were over 3,000 of us that had went through extensive training, but just to think back that there will never be another time that all of us will be in the room together. An in-the-room moment for me was the first time I went to jail and the first time I got out. I was doing nonprofit work, by the way, so no judgment there. I led a nonprofit that helped kids whose parents were incarcerated. And just by the way, talking about stories, the story of everyone that I met was the story of Shawshank Redemption. No one did it. But I think about this, these in-the-room moments. I mean, you can probably think of some of these in-the-room moments yourself. Maybe it was an accomplishment that you had with a group of people. Maybe it was something that you celebrated or an announcement that you were in the room for. Maybe you look and it was a special family memory, or maybe something funny that happened. We all have those stories where it's an insider story. I'm pretty sure one of those moments happened here with a guy named not Pat. It was not Pat Richard. He didn't do it. I mean, you know, I was thinking about this. I was at the conference where we got the not Pat Richard sticker. I don't know everything that this means, but it has a story that is attached to it. We were in the room. But man, think about this. Can you really imagine just being in the room for some of the moments of history? Can you imagine being in the stands when Babe Ruth hit his last home run? Can you imagine being in the stadium when Michael Jordan took the Bulls to their final championship, which is now termed The Last Dance? I mean, I think of some of these things, tragedies that's happened. Man, could you imagine, and maybe someone was, but have been at the tragedy when Dale Earnhardt finished his last race in tragedy? Or maybe at the assassination of Abraham Lincoln or JFK or Dr. King. Think of these moments that people experience together. I'm a guitar fan. I have the artwork on my arm here. I love guitars, I love music, and I just think about what would it be like to be in the last Eddie Van Halen concert? What would that have been like? I mean, these in-the-room moments, they just connect us because we're able to say, I was there when. Do you remember? Oh, did you see that? Or do you remember what happened? Or the way that made me feel. It was an in-the-room moment. But that's not all. There's also these historic moments. It's the greater narrative that we're all engaged in. You think about this, historic moments connect us to an event that changed the world around us. I think about historic moments in history. Imagine being there for the development of the pyramids, or the battles of Alexander the Great, or the building of the Great Wall of China, the Genghis Khan Empire, for those that lived through World War I and World War II, the Great Depression, the Civil War. On a more positive note, the creation of Disneyland. The list goes on and on, but I think the thing that engages us about these specific historical moments are the people who live to write about them and tell the story. They tell the names of the people that were there. They tell what the weather was like and how it felt and how the culture around them was shaped. See, it's these stories that connect us, and I think of the event that probably happened in our lifetime that connects all of us no matter our age, and that's 9/11. It's just funny that you can almost say 9/11 to anyone and it draws our memory to a specific place and time. We've termed it as the day that the world stopped turning. I remember for me, I was 12 years old. I was in 7th grade. The television came on and I saw these World Trade Centers were on fire and I heard the story. And it was the first time in my life that I felt as though the world was not safe. But you know what's fascinating is that I wasn't alone in my emotions. At that age, I had fear. I had anxiety about the future. I felt this sense of unsafety and unrest, but it wasn't just me. My peers felt the same way. My teachers felt the same way. My parents felt the same way. We had been connected by a historic moment in time that had changed and shaped all of us. That still today, there's a lot of emotion attached to that. But what's interesting is if I ask you how that historic moment impacted you. I was asking someone this just the other day, and I asked what they remembered about 9/11. One of the big things that they remembered is the way that travel changed. The new protocols for security. You probably remember that. Everything began to change, and it was interesting what they said, the uncertainty of knowing that something can go wrong now. We know that, but when it happens, it changes the perspective that we have of the world. But then, man, I mean, there's that connects us, but then on the other hand, think about the personal moments. The people's lives who were affected, who lost a father, who lost a son, a mother, a daughter, a friend. They're connected by a unique story, but something that they can relate to. And the world, as we know it, had changed. Man, there's a lot of things that's changed the world as we know it. Vehicles, airplanes, AOL Messenger, MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, Tinder, the list goes on and on. I was sitting in a room last week with a group of people, and there was someone there who was talking about his long-distance relationship that he currently has and how difficult that is. And there was an older gentleman there, and he said, well, you know, I had a long-distance relationship before Skype was even around, and we actually had to talk to each other. And it was just funny as I thought about that, the way these things change us. The way that we communicate has changed. The way we have give information and receive information has changed. The way we interact with people has changed. And it's because we're in the room together experiencing the human experience. But this is really, I really wanted to get to is personal moments. Because personal moments, they connect us to the way we interact, the way we engage, or even the way we disconnect with others. And I think about these personal moments that we've had. See, in the room moments, we were there together when. Historic moments, we may have seen it on the news and it happened to all of us. But personal moments, they shape and impact our life. Only we can tell the story of how each thing has impacted us. And that's why I'm here today. I'm really passionate about people's stories, from interviewing multiple people, from kids to teenagers to parents to teachers to business leaders. It's interesting that every person has a story. And my passion for this comes from my personal story. I lead a nonprofit called Heroes of Impact. Our nonprofit works in youth leadership development and social emotional learning with schools and youth in the community. The concept is that all of us had someone in our life who was a hero as a child or teenager. And how can we be that hero for them as well? If I ask you to take 5 minutes right now, which I'm not, but if I ask you to take 5 minutes right now to talk about someone who impacted your life as a child or teenager, you could probably name that person right now. And that's because they impacted us in a personal way. I remember for me, it was a very personal moment for me when my life changed. It was a historic moment, but it didn't make global news. It didn't make national news. It only made local news. It was an in-the-room moment because there were a specific group of people who experienced it, but it was also a very personal moment. And for me, it felt like the world had stopped. If you've ever read the novel A Series of Unfortunate Events by Daniel Handler, also known as Lemony Snicket, the beginning chapter is called The Bad Beginning, and this is how it reads. If you are interested in stories with happy endings, you would be better off reading some other book. In this book, not only is there no happy ending, there is no happy beginning, and very few happy things in the middle. This is because not very many happy things happened in the lives of the three Baudelaire youngsters. If you know the story, you know that they're at Briny Beach and Mr. Poe shows up to give them the unfortunate news that their parents have been killed in a tragic fire. And as the story continues, many more unfortunate events happen to these children. Now let me explain why I felt like the characters in that story. Now, a little bit about me first. I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, just right outside of Lexington, Kentucky. That's where the accent comes from. I grew up on 120 Chapel Road, and I had a lot of obstacles from the very beginning. My grandfather on my dad's side, he left when my dad was just a child. My grandmother on my dad's side, she passed away before I was born. My grandfather on my mom's side left when she was just young, and my grandmother on her side passed away when I was a teenager. I've always felt this sense that I've not had a really close family relationship because of that with a lot of people. But with that, there was a lot of things, everything from overcoming poverty to abuse to dysfunction to many things that happened. But there was something that 120 Chapel Road taught me, and that taught me to value people. My dad, he was my very best friend. He was the influencer in my life. My dad he taught me to play the guitar when I was only 6 years old. I actually have the tattoo of the guitar he taught me to play on my arm here. But my dad influenced my life in a very specific way. But there were also some mindset things that I had to learn to overcome. Now, you may have overcome some of these things as well. Have you ever heard this? The early bird gets the worm. But good things only come to those who wait. And then when it came to college or success or dreams or plans, there were some specific things that I was told, who do you think you are? Or you can't do that. Wait a minute, did you all grow up on 120 Chapel Road right outside of Lexington, Kentucky too? Because it sounds like we all had some obstacles to overcome. Those were not the greatest obstacles in my story though. Those were mindset things, but I'll never forget the day the world stopped turning for me. And on that night, it seemed like a good night, but I got a text from my 16-year-old little sister that something was terribly wrong and I needed to come home. And I remember pulling into the driveway and seeing police cars in my parents' driveway. And I'll never forget walking up. It was a dark night. The moon was out, and it was a full moon. Stars were out. But I'll never forget walking up to the house and opening the door to the living room that I grew up in, the place we had played, the place we had ate meals together, the place we had shared moments as a family, and I saw my little sister sitting in the lap of a police officer there. And I knew that something had went very wrong. Never forget, at 20 years old, the officers asked me to step outside to tell me that my parents had been hit in a car wreck. And like most of you, hoping for a good ending to this story, I said, and they're at the hospital, I need to go and see them, right? And the silence was deafening because I'll never forget the look on the three officers' face as they looked at one another, they looked at me, and they said, I'm sorry, young man, your parents are at the coroner's office. And it was in that moment that it was a historic moment, it was an in-the-room moment, but it was a personal moment. Because it impacted my 16-year-old little sister in one way, but it impacted me in a completely different way. And I realized at that moment that the people who had invested in me, the things that I'd learned about life, that all of these things had to get me through the next season of life. Learning to forgive the man that made a bad decision, learning to work through forgiving my mom for abuse, working through depression and anxiety. And along that journey, though, it was something about my personal story that I found inspiration in. Because I knew that the legacy could not end there. There was a choice that had to be made, and I was inspired. I was inspired to connect with other people who had a story. Other kids who had lost parents, other people who had walked through tragedy. And it was in that I realized every person has a unique story. It was through that inspiration that I was able to get involved in nonprofit work. But then I think about this. All of us have a story. Sure, maybe I walked through tragedy. I think of some of the stories that I've heard. I connected with Jay last night, and he was sharing some of the tragedies recently walked through. And I think in the room, if I was to engage each of you and ask about what was that historic moment that was personal for you, each of you could share the story with me. And here's the thing. I didn't want this to be another talk about the pandemic. Number one, I'm not an expert at COVID. I don't know if you are, but I'm not an expert. I get most of my news on social media about... Terrible joke. I'm sorry. I didn't want this just to be another pandemic talk about statistics of how COVID has affected us, but a real talk, a real conversation with the question of how do we reconnect? How do we re-engage one another? I mean, these are some of the questions that I've been asking that maybe you have too. How do I actually reconnect with other people? I mean, what does success look like now? How do we measure success in this environment? Will I be good enough to face the challenges that are in front of me? I mean, what happens when we return to the office? Will I get the virus? Is it safe to travel? I mean, in the middle of this, a lot of us are just burnt out. We're burnt out with so many things that's happened in the last 2 years, and here we are back together. This is an in-the-room moment that we're back together in this place. And I admit, I don't have the answers to a lot of these questions, but this is what I do know. I know that the one thing that will reconnect every one of us is our personal story, because you've been impacted, and I've been impacted in a specific and a meaningful way. You see, the thing about what's happened over the last 2 years is it's not only that the world has changed. Sure, the world has changed. And it's not only that the world has changed, but it's that something has happened that, in a sense, maybe we have changed, or there's things that have changed us. I mean, sure, there's plenty of things we could talk about today that would remind us of why we often feel so divided in this season. But I think there's a lot of things that could actually connect us. I mean, we were there together. We were in this time in history when the world shut down. But we've all experienced it differently, and that's where empathy comes in. I mean, consider this. There's people in the room that since the last time you saw them, they lost loved ones. And maybe that funeral looked different than it normally would have. Maybe there's someone in the room that's had kids or grandkids, and there were no visitors able to be at the hospital. I mean, you think there's some people who have changed jobs in the middle of this or relocated to a new state. Some people may have got divorced or remarried. Untelling what kind of stories you may hear. But there's something that we can re-engage one another to ask, how has this impacted you? And so the question we're asking is how do we reconnect? And I believe that it's empathy and it's vulnerability. It's listening, it's understanding, it's sharing our stories with others. I love this quote from Brene Brown. She became very popular. She has one of the five most viewed TED Talks in the world with over 50 million views because of her talk on the power of vulnerability. And this is what she says. She says, in our culture, we associate vulnerability with emotions we want to avoid, such as fear, shame, and uncertainty. Yet we too often lose sight of the fact that vulnerability is also the birthplace of joy, belonging, creativity, authenticity, and love. Or maybe you just need to hear it from, the man known as the world's greatest boss, Michael Scott. I do think that I'm very approachable, but maybe I need to be even approachable-er. And when I think about this is what I believe. I believe that if we start from a place of understanding where we've been and how we've been impacted, we actually have the ability to reconnect on a deep level, to build new relationships, to have new creativity and innovation if we begin by understanding one another. And here's the thing, it's the struggles, it's the celebrations, it's the heroes, it's the personal moments. These are the things that reconnect us to our purpose. These are the things that reconnect us to move forward. And so I actually wanted to have a conversation with someone that I actually just met last night. And if she wants to come onto the stage, Miss Laurie. I want to actually have a conversation because this is a concept that we can reconnect through our stories. But man, let's hear it from someone who has walked through this same historic moment with all of us from her perspective. Give it up for Laurie.
Hello, Laurie.
How are you? Laurie's mic.
Hi.
Hi. All right, this is Laurie. I met Laurie last night. She's pretty awesome, but I'm just now getting to know her, so not necessarily reconnecting, but first connecting. Laurie, just a little bit about you. What are some fun facts about you?
Wow. First of all, I'm looking at this like we have a worksheet here.
We do have a
people being
worksheet.
tested on my answers.
You already got an A+, so it's
Okay, good. Okay, good.
It's all good.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy. Wow. Okay, so I'm Laurie Pottmeyer. I'm the community lead for Microsoft Teams at Microsoft. And this is like my passion, is being at these things, being at these events and getting to be around people. And wow, this is so good. This is my first event back, and it's just really exciting to be here. What did you want to know? Some interesting facts about me?
What's some interesting facts about you?
Oh, well, I don't know how interesting they are, but let's see. I live in the house that I grew up in. That's something, that's like my one thing that I use, when everybody's like, what's something that people don't know about you? Yeah, I live in my parents' room. Like, I have my bedroom in my parents' room.
That is very interesting.
It's kind of weird.
And
it's cool.
I wasn't going to say that. That's great. Very cool.
Yeah, I live in Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
So this is not a long trip for me. This is a convenient trip, close to home.
Close to home.
Yeah.
What's your favorite movie or documentary?
Yes, he says documentary because last night he was like, are you a music person or a movie person? And I was like, neither, really. I mean, I love music and I love movies, but I usually fall asleep in movies. I'm a documentary person. I just watched this documentary on sugar 2 nights ago and decided I'm not going to eat any more sugar.
Sugar-free.
Right before a work trip.
Are you drinking any more sugar, though?
Yeah, that doesn't count.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
It's
Not
candy, cake and candy.
Cake and candy. No more cake and candy.
Or like Starbucks pastries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's hard.
It is hard.
It's great. What about music? What kind of music do you like?
My first concert was Duran Duran.
Okay.
I'm going to age myself. Yeah, my first concert was Duran Duran. I have a very wide variety of music. Like, I can get down with old Journey. Yeah.
Don't Stop Believing.
But then I have teenagers. I have 2 teenagers. So what goes on, when we're in the car is like I have to plug my ears.
That's great. Well, obviously, you've just experienced what we've all experienced, a global pandemic.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, I think it's been a couple of years since this conference happened, and maybe there's some people in the room that you know, maybe some people in the room that know Laurie. But I'm just interested. I'm interested in what some of the major struggles that you have had in your story? And you can look at maybe the top 5, or it may be 3. But what are some of the main struggles that over this last season that you've experienced?
So, when we all went virtual, I mean, it was a shock for a lot of us because people were used to going into the office. And for me, I worked from home already. So it really wasn't that different, except for I had like 2 teenagers at home that I had to keep on their Zoom calls on their devices, making sure that they weren't doing class from bed. That was interesting. But, it wasn't that big of a shock for me. But what was really hard for me was not traveling because, although we were in our 4 walls, like so many of us were, already in our 4 walls that we were just staring around with ourselves. Like, I wasn't also getting out. That was really hard. It was hard not to have that. I mean, I think all of us, it was hard not to have a personal connection, right? Duh. Right. Because we're people and we like personal connections. That was really hard, not leaving.
It's true.
Yeah. Other struggles?
Yeah, anything else that just really stands out that was really difficult?
Yeah, I think, as much as I don't want to have my job be my identity, I kind of felt like I was working really hard and nobody was recognizing it. I don't know if anybody else felt that. That was hard for me. I was I'm at home, busting my ass.
Right.
And nobody cares, nobody knows, and it wasn't that I, you just need a pat on the back, but having a personal connection and being out and talking face to face with somebody and just engaging, you feel like you're making an impact. And then when you're at home and you're in your office, and especially me as community lead, I like to connect with people. That's my job, is connecting with people. Doing that virtually, it was tough. Yeah. It was tough.
That is very tough. All right, I'm sorry about my 6-year-old
I
writing
feel like
here.
we
It's
don't,
kinda
we
terrible.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, we got some things there.
Okay, good.
In my kindergarten drawing. Just keep on going.
Okay.
That's interesting. I mean, I just think about some of the things that you said. It's probably something a lot of us can relate with. I know for me, it was difficult to know, how do you even measure success? Am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job?
Yeah.
We're all
I think
humans.
if you're in a sales organization or even in our, my job as a PM, a feature PM can say, oh, I did this many features, right? Jamie's nodding his head. Yeah, I feel heard.
Yes.
But me not going out and talking to people and being around people, it was hard to measure. Am I making an impact? Because we're all sitting in an office and
True.
With nobody around us, our home office or a dining room table. I don't know. Does anybody feel like they never want to eat at their dining room table because they worked at their dining room table?
Right.
I had to create a space to work. Actually, is this going to be an answer to a question? I feel like I'm wasting an answer.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
Okay.
You're doing great.
I built an office outside, a she shed, but not a she shed. It's everybody calls it a she shed. I'm whatever. It's my office. Yeah, so I built that. That was I'm not going to travel, so I'm going to build an office. That was a really big deal for me because I had that separation. So, working from home was never really a big deal. I could kind of separate my work, but I would sit on my couch and I could see my computer. That's not good.
Yeah.
And for the people that don't have a separate space, I think that was even tougher because the dining room table or whatever, that just became their workspace, which is usually a family space or a personal space, right? So I created this office. It's I have to walk 10 feet, and I have to go outside, and now I can close the door, and then I'm done. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is, actually, it's life-changing. I definitely recommend it.
The recommendation of this talk is to build a she shed.
Yeah.
That is the recommendation.
The wood prices are tough right now, but
Well, that is true.
it's okay.
I found it very interesting to just not know if the people you're engaging in a very serious conversation was wearing pants. I thought that was just really
Oh my
awkward.
gosh.
I think you have a story about
raise
this.
of hands. Did anybody have an awkward video moment? Or not yourself, but did anybody, yeah. Okay, I want to hear it. Let's talk about that later. Yeah, I had one too. Somebody this is recorded. Somebody that I know that I was on a call with decided they needed to use the restroom and totally took the computer with them. Oh,
Was
there's
the
nothing
sound
bad.
on?
The sound, it was muted. Thank God it was muted.
Could've
But
been
then
terrible.
I don't know if it was laptop or phone, doesn't really matter, but it was like facing up so you saw the ceiling. Thank God. But it was obvious, you know?
It's great.
Yeah.
Awkward moments.
Yeah.
The awkward moments of the pandemic.
Uh-huh.
Well, what about some things? I mean, in the middle of that, I think we really focus on the things we're struggling with. We hear that a lot all around us. But what are some things that you would celebrate during this last season? So maybe something you learned or something that you look back and you say there's something good that came out of this.
Oh, you know, I think that I've taken a lot for granted. Like, I realized that I'm an introvert. I know it's kind of weird, the job I have, but I'm an introvert, and it takes a lot of energy for me to be around people, but then I like my space. I have to, like, recharge. And I realized that that's okay. Like, it's totally worth it. Like, I miss that connection. I took that for granted, you know? So definitely that. I realized, like, my kids are kind of cool. Yeah.
That's great.
They're fun. Yeah. Like, my son, one story, you know, this is the beginning of the pandemic, and they were doing virtual school. And my daughter kind of got into it, like she was playing school or something. Like, it really wasn't real school. It was placed, and she's in junior high. And my son decided he was gonna, like, make a big deal out of the fact that she was going over her time with her friends and having a little study group. And so he went downstairs and did, like, a big, I don't know how he did it, but he had his phone or something, and he did, like, a bell, and he's like, class is over, you know, and just making fun of her because she's in a school he's not. Yeah, so they were fun, they were good, and celebrations. I also realized that, you know, personal connection, yes, and one of the things that was good that I saw that came out of it was we got to talk to people from all around the world. A lot of people from other countries got to speak in other countries. A lot of people that usually wouldn't be able to travel to an event got to attend those events internationally because everything was virtual. So I think it kind of connected us. And I said this to somebody last night, like, it was so weird because usually we're dealing with something local, right? Something in our own communities that are local, like, I mean, not a pandemic, but this is a global pandemic. It was like,
Right.
yeah, we were all dealing with this, like, all around the world. And working globally, it was comforting in a sick way to know that, like, all of us were stuck at home. All of us were going through this. And so we kind of, like you were talking about earlier, you know, by the way, you're, like, a really good speaker. I was like, I have to get up here and talk after you. Talk with you. Anyway, but it totally resonated, right? Like, people just, I don't know, it resonated just with, yeah.
Yeah. Well, how old are your kids?
Told them 15, almost 13 and 15.
It reminded me when you're talking about that. I don't know if anyone else experienced this, but did you all have in your neighborhood or anywhere where people were going through doing the graduation train? And all the cars went through
The
honking?
birthdays.
And
Remember that?
birthdays,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Anybody have those, like the birthday drive-bys in their neighborhood or their own kids, or yeah, I attended those. Yeah, that was pretty cool. So my birthday's in March, March 22nd. Actually, I'm an Aries. If anybody wants to know.
Leo.
So Leo, okay. So that was obviously right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was like within days, right? Like, we went, I think, when did the world crash? I don't know. Right before MVP Summit. That's me. Like, I was really bummed because selfishly, I was like, wait, I don't get a birthday? Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
sad.
interesting though.
And then
Yeah.
the kids, but then they started those drive-bys, and that was pretty cool. That was fun, right?
Yeah.
Give us something fun to do, and
Did you all do something to celebrate your birthday?
no, I'm still waiting,
Oh.
like a year and a half later.
Hey guys, party for Laurie's birthday.
No, we don't need to celebrate that.
She'll take
I'm at
gift
the age.
cards to Starbucks, but
Yeah.
nothing with sugar.
Yeah, nothing with sugar. Yeah, those were fun. I think those were ways. I think this is going to be crazy looking back and just like remembering all the stuff that we all went through and our kids went through, and
Right.
being able to have I took pictures in the grocery store of like they basically were acting like we weren't going to have food kind of thing. Like I felt like I was living in the Depression for a few times. Going into Whole Foods. Oh, toilet paper. Oh my God.
Toilet paper crisis.
That was awful.
It's traumatic.
Like the group text, if anybody goes to Costco and finds TP, like hook me up. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's true. Well, I mean, what's it been like for you reconnecting, even traveling to an event like this?
I mean, I came out of the elevator yesterday and there were a few people down at the bar and I was just like, like, I think Jonathan was like, your smile. And I was like, I know, I can't believe we're in person. This is my first traveling. So yeah, it's amazing. I haven't even seen my own team.
Wow.
Like I haven't, because I'm in Portland, they're in Bellevue, well, most of them, some of them. Yeah, so I just, like Sean, oh my God. Like, yeah, it's just like, it's crazy.
It
Just
is.
being in person. It's crazy
And they all
good.
showed up wearing pants, even though they've not been in person in a while. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I was worried about Jamie, but he rolled in with that purple shirt.
Well, this worksheet, sorry about my kindergarten writing there. This is a worksheet that I do in youth leadership development very often. And one of the things that we would do is we would normally rate like these top 5 things. And so you would look through and say, based on these struggles and these celebrations, what were the most meaningful things? Without rating those, I would just be interesting after everything you talked about, what was the biggest struggle? If you were to say, this was the one thing that I'll always remember from this time, this was the biggest struggle that I had. It's okay.
You're like, I want you to cry or pass out. Yeah, I'm gonna cry. Okay, here we go. We're all there.
We're there.
Biggest struggle. Really? Okay. My dad's 80. He has COPD. So, it was just scary.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just scary. I think, and it's still kind of scary, but
Still scary. Wow. But there's a lot of people that can relate with that.
yeah. I think just being scared.
I feel like I need to give
I
you a
did it.
hug because you're crying. I don't know what
know.
to do. I know that
No.
we planned that, but
Yeah, I
we
just
didn't.
you tried, and I was like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm gonna get up on stage. Yeah, that was probably. It was just scary. It was like on top of being overworked, not having like recognition, even though you know people recognize, right? But like just like you don't get that personal connection and feel that. Yeah, I was just like my kids are at home and I'm tired and all the stuff, right? We all had it. And then just to be scared on top of that, and I know some people weren't scared, and that's cool, whatever. But like, I was just freaking out because of my dad. It
Right.
wasn't so much me. I knew I'd be okay, but just having that, yeah.
I mean, that it really hits home. I think about what you said. Some people are not scared, and this is not a talk about that, but I think it really hit home for me when Jonathan's mom passed away. You know, just when you start having loved ones that you see pass away in this experience, it kind of just hits home like this is something that's a real scary
And
time.
when it starts impacting
Yes.
you personally, yeah, sure.
On a more positive note,
Yeah.
what's the biggest thing that you would celebrate? You talked about a lot of things, but if
yeah.
you're telling the story of what
Okay.
happened in the pandemic, what would you celebrate?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that came out of it was just not to take things for granted, not to take personal connections for granted. I used to travel and it was just no big deal, and I would just hop on a plane and go and, you know, have a happy hour and then go speak or go, you know, talk
Right.
to the people. I mean, it was great. It was glorious, right? And now this is like, it's such a special thing. It's so like good that we can be together. And it's not just with this conference, but it's with having Thanksgiving together with people and just, you know, just all those personal connections. Be able to go celebrate somebody's birthday and have a dinner and
Yes.
do those things. I don't take that for granted anymore.
It's really cool. And your birthday celebration that's coming up.
I can't
to
wait.
make up. It's going
It's going to be amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
What about, like, I call this heroes, but just who were some people that were meaningful to you during that time? Like, were there some people that just really stood out that helped you get through?
You know, work-wise, I think everybody, everybody that was able to come into the office their dining room, whatever it might be. Like anybody that was able to log in, like they're heroes. We're all heroes. God, we made it through this. We're sitting here today. We're here. But I think for me, it was just my personal, the personal connections at home and having my friends around me and, having that local support system. Yeah, they were, I think just, like, can you come over and sit on my patio? And
Right.
I mean, really?
And it stands out when you're living in a world where, even our lanyards, we're trying to figure out how to engage one another.
Yeah.
But to know that there were some people that you could just connect with.
Just to see a face. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Besides the grocery store clerk, if you even went to the grocery store, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, those people. I love seeing the tubs out on people's front porches. Like, thank you to the delivery people. Like, we no longer take those people for granted either. It's just there's so many people. God, the healthcare workers. Are you kidding me? Yeah, for real. And there are people that I feel like our jobs at Microsoft and probably what all of you do, like, we're freaking heroes. Like, we kept this world alive through technology, right? So, kudos to all of you, because not only was it job security for many of us, that's a plus. Weird, but that was a plus. But we were all working long hours trying to just keep the world alive. So, I think we're all heroes.
That is true. What about just meaningful moments? Some people talk about anything from spirituality to going to the ocean to the mountains. Was there anything that was like a meaningful moment to you that you look back and say, I don't want to forget this moment?
Probably my dad's 80th birthday. It was in May. We did celebrate, and that was great because everybody's vaccinated. So we got all of our family together, and we went to the beach, and we celebrated, and it was really great having extended family together and just, being able to be in the same like beach house together and celebrate that big birthday.
What a memory.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. It was really a far cry from like what was happening a year ago when I was like dropping groceries off at his doorstep and like waving through the window, and he would like leave notes, for us, and the kids would draw pictures, and even though they're teenagers, but we still did it. This was fun. A little different from that.
This one could be a little bit harder, but I always like to ask this question. If there were 2 words that you would use to describe that last season, what would those words be without using profanity?
Do they have... Thank you for that clarification. Do they have to go together, or just
no,
2 random words?
Just two words.
Without profanity. Okay, 2 words. Okay.
Okay, or maybe 2 words that describe just where you're at right now.
Oh, that's different. Yeah. Oh, thankful. Yeah, I think that's definitely now and from then, and just like, wow. Did that happen? Is this happening? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Wow.
Wow. It's
Wow.
how you say it. Wow.
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 Thankful and wow.
Thankful. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think it's awesome. I just connected with Laurie for the first time last night at the party, but it's just cool because I feel like I know you a little bit better. You ask somebody what they've been through, going through having your dad, and you talking about that. You talk about your kids and the experience that they had. Just to hear these moments that you have, there's almost a sense of empathy and vulnerability that we all got to experience with you, Laurie. So thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Thank you.
Everybody give it up for Laurie.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I think, as we close, I think just the big point is this: reconnecting begins with engaging the stories of others and sharing our own. So my question that I just want you to leave you with, that I think we could all ask, is just ask other people, what's your story? What have you been through? What's your story? Thanks for having me today.
All right, thanks, Joel. Man, that was amazing. I don't know about you, but so much there hit home for me at least. whether that was just talking about struggles or things that we've been through for the past year. Laurie, I fully understand some of the things that you were coming from. Really appreciate this time. I'll just say this, on that whole recognition thing, I heard one time the best way for leaders to know whether or not their people needed recognition was really simple, is whether they were breathing. As leaders, we should always be trying to figure out how to recognize people. So we're wrapping up the keynote here. We've got a little bit of time before our first session, our first breakout session starts at 11. I want to take this time. First off, I know Josh probably thanked the sponsors before, but again, huge shout out to the sponsors. This could not happen. No matter how many people show up to these events, the sponsors make this happen for us. There's 5 volunteers who head this up. We're not bankrolled or anything by anybody other than the fact that the sponsors show up. So we're going to take some time. We're going to ask you guys to go spend some time in the expo hall. You've got from now until 11 o'clock when the breakouts start to go hang out, go see all the folks. They'll be here. They'll be the attendee party is in the expo hall tonight. So go get connected, reconnect to folks that you haven't seen, find new friends. That's what this is all about. We're here for the community. So thank you all, and thanks to Joel, thanks to Jamie for the keynotes, and we really appreciate it.